Today, we're going to be introducing the 2026 State of Marketing Attribution Report that is new to the market. It's actually hitting the airwaves or the internet waves today. And I have the amazing collaborators that helped us make this report come to life so we can share the findings with you guys to join us. So with this, I will bring on stage Scott Brinker and Frans Riemersma. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It was super exciting collaborating with you, and I'm very grateful for it. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful. By way of introduction, I'm Scott Brinker. I am a MarTech analyst and advisor for Chief MarTech.
Yes, my name is Frans Riemersma, analyst doing a lot of MarTech research, and we're sharing some of that research today, and it's very exciting, very insightful. Also for us, we learned a lot. It's great.
So on that note, let me ask you a question. Were there any things as you were doing the research to put this report together that really surprised you, were unexpected, things that you thought were one way, but they came out a different way?
Scott, go ahead.
When you tackle a topic like attribution, I think we're so used to a mental model of like, oh, attribution. So that would be like, that's really about the data and the models, and analytics, and like that is the key of attribution. And don't get me wrong, that is clearly a big part of like the mechanics of what's involved in attribution. But it came through so clearly, in all of the research, all of the companies that we interviewed around this, that the real value in attribution was at the layer above that. It really was like a people coordination mechanism. I don't know, that like changed my worldview of attribution. There's like my life before that moment, and there's my life after that moment, and it's never going to be the same.
That's amazing. That's actually a good way to tease this up. And another thing I was going to ask you before I kind of give you the stage to dive into the findings, could you share with us and with the audience the kind of the methodology behind the report, anything that you want to share with the behind the scenes of how we arrived to the point where we are today?
Well, my aha moment is actually something that when doing the research, we interviewed 6 brands that are in your client base, and they're very successful. And these people were super smart experts, super modest. They were very realistic about what they were doing. And it gave me a new definition of attribution, because for 7-8 years, I'm teaching at business schools and universities. And we're doing attribution. We just don't call it this way. And we're doing it more manually, Excel sheets and whatever, just to give them a little taste of, how do you do this stuff? How do you link one thing to another and reverse engineer revenue? You guys do it at scale, and automate it, but not just blindly automating stuff, but, connecting the human aspect with the statistical data. And that is such an exciting way of approaching it. So for me, 7-8 years came together with, the 6 interviews, and it was like, yes, this is the way forward, especially in times of AI.
And it intersected actually with research that Frans and I have been doing here now for several years. On one side, the technical side of it, really this evolution of what we now call context engineering, become a very big topic in AI. And we'll talk about it in the context of attribution here in a bit. But then also the mission of value engineering, which, Frans, this has been like, your passion for years.
Yeah, 100%. Value engineering is mostly about marketing. How do we generate value for the customer and for the company? Preferably both. Then we're doing a really good job.
So why don't we dive right into it and show people what that both looks like?
I'm ready, Scott.
Let's do it, my friend.
So let's dive right in, Scott. We have been talking about the new rules of revenue intelligence, and the title of our report is about the State of Attribution 2026. It was an exciting research that we did, interviews, analysis, and basically what we learned is that the state of attribution is shifting, but really dramatically. And there's 2 forces. Well, we mentioned them earlier. You mentioned them earlier, like context engineering, value engineering. What is that? So we'll unpack that as well. And then Also, that's nice theory, but what works actually in practice, daily practice? That's the third topic we'll dive into. And then basically you will learn, because if there's one thing we want you to take away or take home or take back to your office actually, is cash over coverage. I'll leave it
It's
at
a
that.
pithy enough thing that, you know, like you could get that as a tattoo on your arm. I think I might actually get that one. Cash over coverage. Words to live by.
I think Caliber Mind will sponsor that on the next event, probably. All right, and then finally, yeah, how Caliber Mind powers attribution 2.0, because that's what we're talking about. That's the shift. We go from attribution 1.0 to 2.0, and that's when Nadia is joining us again. And without further ado, let's start with the shift of attribution.
Yeah, well, I mean, attribution, it's been the topic of marketing that keeps coming back again and again now here over decades, you know. And you know, if you follow various threads on LinkedIn, you know, you've probably seen over recent years like this sort of frustration of like, oh, well, you know, attribution didn't really deliver, you know, on its promise. You know, what was that promise? I mean, the promise was like, we can actually talk to the board about how marketing is delivering revenue impact for the business. But there were like a lot of reasons why, even with that noble goal, you know, the promise is still the right promise to be making there. How do we deliver revenue for the business? You know, there were things that sort of got us sidetracked along the way. You know, part of it was the language. Part of it was the mechanism. You know, so many of these things really got, you know, focused down on like, okay, well, what are particular conversion events and how are we looking at this particular activity? You know, when the board, it doesn't speak those, you know, marketeer languages. It speaks revenue. I think one of the phrases you used as we were, you know, doing our analysis, you said it was like asking for directions in Italy in Chinese. You know, just not happening. But just because we ran into all those challenges doesn't mean that the attribution promise is something that we should give up on. In fact, you could actually argue now it's more important than ever.
100%, because this explains why we constantly face budget cuts in marketing. We speak conversion, we don't speak revenue, and that's a language boardroom doesn't understand. They speak to investors, they have to defend risks analysis and balance sheets, and then we come up with conversions. They go like, we have no clue what you're talking about. So yeah, you're first in line in the next budget cut, and that happened for quite a while. So what we see is a big shift here. The promise is still valid and very needed, not just for the boardroom, but also for marketeers. And that's not getting any easier, Scott. We see more tech, more channels, more data. Oh my God, there's AI with new products, agents, touch points, confusion. We left out the word anarchy here. I have this Johnny Rotten type of image in my mind. For the very old people, they know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's a, you know, because of the explosion of more data, more touch points, and also just because of the velocity that AI has introduced, like everything is moving faster, which also increases the volume of all that. You know, if we're simply playing by the rules of attribution 1.0, you know, and it's about activities and integration and, you know, data on those sorts of things, we actually just keep falling further and further behind, you know, because it's just a sea that keeps expanding out to the horizon, you know. But really the key shift that happens here with attribution 2.0 is it's not just about, you know, the integration, you know, of what is happening across our go-to-market. It's really about the alignment of what's happening across our go-to-market and how we actually have a shared understanding of our customer, like our cash over coverage customers, in going through that journey.
Yeah, that's the biggest insight that we had, you know, attribution not as attribution models and one over favoring one over the other, like first touch, last touch, multi-touch. You see different camps of people, you know, defending one or the other, one over the other. It's none of the above. It's more like a connective tissue across departments. Do we speak the same language? And these people that we interviewed, they speak more like, yes, in this case, we're using this model because it's closer to what we really witness in real life. So that helps us predict and support and see where the KPIs are going, as opposed to, okay, it's always this model or always that model. So they're very flexible there. And I love that.
It's not first touch or last touch. It's, are you in touch? Are you in touch with your customers? Are you in touch with your colleagues? Yeah, that's the touch that matters.
Fantastic. Yes. And then, yeah, we spoke about two forces reshaping attribution. And there is, of course, AI, and it's changing a lot of things. And that's what we call the technological shift. And it then also impacts the organization, or actually the profession of marketing. Maybe, Scott, you can talk about context engineering.
Yeah, well, I definitely see these things as like the yin and yang of the modern marketing operations at this point here. You know, we do need a technical foundation upon which this stuff happens. And increasingly, the framing of that technical foundation is what we call context engineering. It's this recognition of like, okay, we have more data than ever. We have more moving parts than ever. What's happening with AI and the steady introduction of more and more agents behind the scenes, customer facing, you know, it's simply exploding, you know, the amount of like activities and touch points that are running on this. Where the challenge becomes is the coordination of that entire engine, that entire machine. And really what that comes down to is making sure that we understand for any given action that's happening here, how are we making sure that we've got the right data, you know, we've got the right set of services, we've got the right aligned instruction and direction to be able to execute on that. And again, this is something that isn't limited to attribution. This is now the mission with MarTech these days, is how do we run an incredibly efficient context engineering infrastructure. But as we'll see again and again here throughout this presentation and the report, you know, attribution in many ways becomes the spine for the alignment across that context engineering mission. But the question then becomes like, what is all that context engineering in the service of?
And yeah, that's what you would call, could call value engineering. And we all know, you know, the marketing profession will change and is changing because of this. And many people are afraid that maybe AI is coming for their jobs. Well, maybe that's a good thing. Sorry to say. You don't want to be a plumber. You don't want to be an operator or just a campaign manager going for conversion. You want to be a choreographer, a moderator, and a value engineer. Contribute bottom line. And how cool is that? And that's exactly what is happening. So in the report, we talk about you are removed from the loop. You're on top of it now. And now you need to have an idea, an opinion, and maybe a decision on where to go. What will we do more? What will we do less? And why? All revenue driven. And that makes many conversations so much easier. Instead of everything is equally important, let's do all. Let's boil the data ocean. Man, it makes me tired just thinking of that. So if you can focus and reverse engineer from making the right revenue and then reverse engineer, then life becomes really simple. So yes, please change your job, change your role, and be on top of things rather than in the middle of the boiled ocean.
What is my future in an AI world? Value engineering, my friend, value engineering.
And there we go. That's the organizational shift. And yeah, it's working together. Again, you said initially it felt like maybe a statistical exercise, this project, this report, but it became more of working together. So you come up with this idea. I love it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is actually a framework I attribute to my friend Dharmesh Shah, you know, from HubSpot, who claims he got it from Elon Musk, you know, but just try and use this as a mental model to understand why when we talk about alignment, you know, this isn't some sort of like, you know, warm and fuzzy, like, you know, amorphous sort of thing, like, oh, well, we're aligned. No, like alignment is the ball game. When you are running an organization of any scale, you know, particularly when you have like really sharp people, really driven people, in fact, even more so when you have really sharp and driven people, you know, to the degree that they each sort of have a set of blinders and they're like, okay, this is my mission. I'm going to go do this mission. I'm going to run it, you know, and then this other person's like, okay, I've got this mission and this is what I'm going after and I'm running hard. You know, the thing is in their individual vector, the direction and velocity that they're headed, be incredibly successful in that one thing. But when you step back and you look at the organization, you're like, well, wait a second, this vector is heading in this direction, this vector is heading in this other one, and the reason this analogy holds is because apparently both Elon and certainly Dharmesh are very mathematical, folks, is if you take vector going in this direction and pair it with a vector going in this other direction, what you end up with is you end up not moving anywhere. These things start canceling each other out. And I'm sure, anyone who's actually been trying to do go-to-market work in a large organization is not fully aligned, understands the incredible friction that adds to this process. And the solution to it is you have got to, if you can find a way to get the vectors going in the same direction, heck, they don't even have to be in the perfectly exactly lined up direction, but even just in the same quadrant, it changes tremendously. Instead of this tension that is preventing forward progress, you're actually in a mode now where the efforts that this team is doing and that this person is doing and this other group is doing, they're building upon each other, and that momentum compounds. And again, particularly at this point in time when AI is just driving this acceleration of which organizations can move most quickly and most effectively, it makes all the difference in the world. So I don't know, this mental model to me is okay, why do we want to make such a big deal about this alignment mechanism with Attribution 2.0? Is because this is the key to getting your vectors going in the same direction.
I think this is also where the expression comes from, don't mistake motion for action. I mean, there's a lot of motion on the left-hand side, but no action. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. Yeah. Yeah.
Well said. You see, you summed up in about 5 seconds what it took me 5 minutes to say. Well done, my friend.
Yeah, well, what I see is because in your daily life as a marketer, a lot of motion is probably a lot of meetings, a lot of politics, and a lot of that's all the stuff you don't want. So action is more you look at the attribution in specific journeys, and you all align and you know why you're doing it. Specific pieces in your team contribute to the bigger picture. And that is what you see on the right-hand side. It's brilliant. And Scott, this is one of the interviewees spoke about the metaphor as a control tower. And that really, really hit home. It hit home so bad that we put it on the first page of the report and said, okay, we're going to steal that one just bluntly.
It's the cover of the report. Yes, it's the visualization, And again, the metaphor of it is, you think about an airplane is a very sophisticated device. And, if you're peered in on the cockpit of a 747, right? An enormous dashboard, all these different levers and, and that's incredibly valuable, for those pilots flying that plane, to be able to lean into that dashboard and those mechanisms, for the actions they're taking. But there's not just one plane in the air, and you think of I don't know, the airport, like JFK in New York or something like this. It's not about the individual planes, or it's not just about the individual planes. It's about the coordination mechanism of, okay, well, how do we make sure there's a sequence of which planes are taking off in what order and which are they landing? And let's make sure that, these things have the right spacing, that, it's really the role of that control tower of, it's not replacing the dashboards, the cockpits on any of these planes, but it's providing the sort of signal into all of those cockpits that allows them to be coordinated and aligned. I don't know, just that metaphor, as soon as, that person had brought that up in the interview, I'm like, yes. That it is it. Attribution 2.0 is your control tower, your marketing control tower.
And the metaphor doesn't stop there. I think we'll double click on that later on. You see big airports, small airports, they don't have a gazillion landing strips, airstrips. They have a dozen, maybe around a dozen or 3 to 5 smaller airports. That's your customer journey. So yes, a lot of planes or customers are landing and taking off, but it's something you really can focus on and make sure those airstrips are really safe, really well designed, optimized for efficiency and speed and everything. Whereas what we are doing is with boiling the data ocean, we create millions of landing strips, airstrips. They can land anywhere because they could maybe possibly land there. This is, I think this resonates with many people where especially managers say, yeah, we have to be present at every touch point. That has nothing to do with marketing. That's just a panic attack, making sure you're present everywhere. You have a couple of airstrips, make sure they're safe, they land well, take off well, and then you're good. Then you're golden.
Coordinate everything on those, yes.
That's exactly. And well, this is something we come up with during the conversation and the data analysis, that in essence, what you see happening constantly and what really changed because of AI, and you see here before AI now and now with AI, so the future is almost also what we say attribution 1.0 and 2.0. It really has an impact there. So what our task is as marketers is making sure that we translate data, we collect data, we clean it, and then translate it into information, then translate it into insights. We'll come back to that later, but that's very important. And in the before AI era, data was abundant. But it's, and we hear this often, we don't have clean data, but that's not enough. You need to make sure it's also becoming information, and from there insights. And because we didn't have enough capacity, we didn't have the skills, the amount and the resources to create those insights were limited. And you can see in this left-hand side, journey A, we sometimes didn't even reach real insights. It was just stuck in information. That was as good as it got back then. Right now, if you feed that into AI, and you can use Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and best is all three of them, and they talk to each other and you have a drink, which is great. And then what you see is that it blows the insights wide open. That doesn't mean that's, your work is done. You still need to figure out, okay, but which of those insights drive actual revenue, drive value for the customer? So now we have finally an abundance of insights. Now the game is on. What is the revenue driving conversation and journey that we really should be having with the customers?
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about this a bit too, but the requirement of leadership at that point in time, it's different. It used to be that because so few insights actually percolated their way up to the top of this, that like, okay, well, we have 3 insights, we have a certain amount of capacity, I guess we can just go execute on those 3. Okay, this is the leadership, is let's make sure we get the execution right. It's funny that in a world where we're moving from a scarcity of insight to an abundance of insight, which you would think is a good thing, and is a good thing, but only if you're able to overcome the challenge that now we have this abundance of all these insights. The game shifts to becoming like, okay, how do we select the insights that are actually going to have the greatest impact for us, and have the courage to be able to say, and these other insights, as interesting as those insights are, they are not going to, those are other theoretical runways out there in the world. These are the 2 or 3 runways that are really the ones that drive the impact and the efficiency for us. It's, in some ways, it's both an easier job for leadership because you have so much at your fingertips, and a harder one because you have to make these decisions. And again, this is where getting that alignment on decisioning across the organization, it really becomes the whole ballgame.
And it changes also the abundant data, because right now, because we never really got to the insights level, not frequently enough. I've done it quite a few times with when teaching with company data from real life companies. What happens once you hit insights, you start to look at your data completely differently. You have a priority for this type of data and these fields, and the rest is not that important. So suddenly you don't have to collect a host of data. You're very focused on what you need to collect, what needs to be clean, because we know exactly what type of insights we're pulling from those data points. It will make your life a lot easier. So that was a lot of theory, you could say. What works in practice? We spoke to a lot of people, and basically we saw 3 big shifts. First of all, the outcome shift. which has an impact on the organizational shift. We spoke about that, and the architecture shift. But the outcomes is, it's a big difference that we now shift from value over credit. So what we saw is one of the interviewees said, yeah, we really got stuck in a kind of who gets the credit for this campaign, for this contribution, attribution. And it's now much more cross departments, a conversation about, okay, what drives actually revenue? As you saw with the vectors, you know, in different teams, it's a collective. So you basically group and align around the customer as a company.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it was so clear, like, okay, the question of like, who gets credit, you know, versus a question of what is the most impactful opportunity for us and how do we align on delivering that? I mean, those questions, they're like entirely different universes.
and maybe it's the word that crossed your mind up until now, and it's change management, and it's almost by design. It's you can't stop it. You have to do this. So you change the way you talk to each other, you talk to different departments, and this is what we saw also. You read it in the report where many of the interview, almost all us, were talking about, we as marketing team are now in a control tower, which means we're educating other teams how to read the customer. What drives value? How do you read this attribution model? How do you read this dashboard and this outcome? They even make sure that they don't show all in the dashboard. They just show certain pieces so they know for sure that sales, customer success, all the other teams are orchestrated and are doing the right things at the right time, rather than, oh, here's the dashboard, have fun. And that was a big shift, what we saw in the organizational part. Much more alignment, and also understanding we don't have to be present at every touch point. There are a couple of decisive moments per segment that have a real impact. Which ones are those? And we'll come back to that later as well.
So actually, on the organizational shift piece of this, you know, we have here like alignment over automation. I mean, one of the things that's happening right now just across marketing, go-to-market in general, is leveraging AI to automate more and more, you know, turn more and more things over to agents. The challenge with this is if you aren't aligned on what these agents are doing or what these automations are doing, you're taking a process that was perhaps slightly broken before, you know, but even though it was slightly broken because it didn't have alignment, you know, the manual friction, you know, allowed there to be ways to like, oh, well, we can sort of paper over this and try and catch this here, you know. But when you turn these things more and more over to agents and automations to just run at speed and scale, if you don't have the alignment on that, it is an absolute recipe for disaster. And I think you're actually seeing a lot of teams come to this recognition of like, okay, great, we're automating the heck out of this. Oh, wait a second, like what is the decision architecture and how does this automation relate to what's happening over in this side of the organization? So again, like if you want to be able to leverage AI and automation as you should, getting the alignment piece is essential. And yeah, this attribution provides such a phenomenal spine for that.
And then there is, of course, the architecture shift. And what happens from left to right is almost automatically. If you start talking revenue, everything changes. So it's almost like a domino effect. And the last one is the architecture. Remember, for the past decades, maybe we started there. And maybe that explains a lot. But what you see with the architecture shift is that there was a lot of integration, system integration, data integration. But what was missing was the layer on top, which was more the organizational integration. And that happens at a different level. It's more a semantic level, a translation level, right?
You know, I'm having like flashbacks to, you know, way back when the original Agile manifesto of like, you know, prefer this over that, you know. Yeah, this is just such a great summary of it. Like, you know, value over credit, alignment over automation, translation over integration. It's not that credit, automation, and integration aren't important. They are. It's that if you don't get the thing on the left right, you know, the thing on the right just ultimately doesn't matter.
Perfect. And the thing is, what we often ask, and this is what we have done with the interviews, but also during the research and what I've seen at the business universities and schools, that Many marketers are still not able to answer these three simple questions. Who is our most profitable customer? What do they buy most? And what is the margin, the corresponding margin? And if you do this exercise like 3 times, you probably have covered 80% of the revenue of your entire company. And you can do the same on a journey level, and see, okay, what were the 5 content pieces, the 5 journeys, or what is it, runways, airstrips, and then find out, okay, actually we've been over engineering, we have been engineering for coverage and not for cash. And a lot of people are not able to answer it, but as soon as you can, the boardroom is listening. And I keep coming back to this beautiful phrase somebody told me, that marketing is the customer story well told at the boardroom table. And this is what you need. If you don't do this homework, then it's going to be very difficult. And here's another one. This is what we call revenue forensics. And it's basically looking at proven revenue. What have we done before? Because then we can do it more often. And here I get a lot of pushback from people at the university because they say, Frans, you don't get it. Marketing is about new leads, new business. Yes, but what should that new lead and new business look like? It should be like this, more of this, or slightly different. And then if you have decomposed this and done the forensics, which data points are really important for these profitable customers. What if we change 1 or 2 elements, not everything in the equation? Then you suddenly start to open up new markets or maybe new product categories. And that is the most exciting way of doing it. We often think that inventors sit down, try to invent stuff and shout out, Eureka! Whereas in reality, it's the opposite. It's just tweaking a little bit, changing one element in the equation. You go like, hey, that's funny. That's the sign of a new discovery. Hey, that's funny. Not just, a stand-up comedian, also in marketing.
Let's face it, revenue forensics is just a much cooler term for this as well, too, right? Like if Sherlock Holmes, was he working, today, he'd be like, marketing operations. This is where I can really apply my talent. So paging Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
I like that one. Actually, to double click on the Sherlock Holmes thing, many times I tell people when, doing this exercise exactly, you will get a lot of pushback from the organization because they are used to, it's not working, we don't have the data, it's not clean or whatever. So I always tell them, be the Sherlock Holmes of your company with a pit bull mentality. Don't let go. And the beauty is that you will find answers. You will also find answers to conversations that were pointless, but nobody knew. So, they become like almost urban or company myth. And people keep coming back to, we should tap into this country or maybe that segment. Once you have the data, you can tell with certainty, and they will see that certainty like, yes, that's a good idea, or no, that's not a good idea at all. And then you're done. You can move on as a company across teams. That's a great feeling.
Marketing myth busting.
Yeah, there you go. And this is that's something we discovered as well. We showed it earlier in the table, but here we are unpacking it because it's too important not to double click on this. There are 3 mindsets that you as a marketer and marketing ops person need to have. It's data, information, and insights. It's 3 different things. And I would almost recommend, a split personality, which is crazy to recommend, of course. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But the thing is, it is what I see and what we see also with the interviews, it is a different mindset. If you're deep in data, you need analysis and rigor. What is this data actually doing? Is it clean? Is it the right set? Are we complete? Is it a subset? You have to almost put your data analysis away for 2 days and then come back as a completely different person, as if somebody else handed over to you that data set and you go like, what is this actually telling us? And this is where you have to connect almost to your brain to your heart or your gut or whatever you want to call it. Somebody said storytelling is data with a soul. Well, connected with what is this client actually trying to do? The most important client, the number one question. And once you know this, then you go into the insights, which I would recommend maybe for 2 days again. Put it aside because not all information is relevant. Some of it is really relevant. And in this area, you need alignment across the board, talk to people, but also courage. Courage to take decisions and take action. This is where you have actionable insights.
Yeah. No, and I love, you know, in the report, there's a visualization of this, you know, as a stacked pyramid, that even though these are different mindsets, they are so complementary and essential to each other. You know, I think even in the way the diagram shows here, it's like so much of Attribution 1.0 was really just focused on that first foundational layer, the data, the analysis, the rigor. And again, it's not like that isn't important. Like that, if you don't have that foundation right, anything you're going to build upon that foundation, you know, is shaky and suspect. So one of the things is I just really love the way we visualize this in the report. You know, is this pyramid with, you know, these three different layers that build on top of each other, even though they're three different mindsets. They have a crucial relationship to each other. And one of the things about Attribution 1.0 is it got so focused on that data layer, that foundation of, you know, the analysis and the rigor, which again, it's important. Like if you don't have a solid foundation on that, anything you're going to build on top, you know, becomes shaky and suspect. But all too often in the Attribution 1.0 world, that was kind of where things ended, or it was maybe then just barely handed off like, oh, well, how would you tell this story? You know, so many of the people we talked to in doing the research on this report, you know, because they had that foundation that they could rely on, it really become about like the storytelling and the empathy, not just with their customers, which is super important, but also with their colleagues and their collaborators across the organization, you know, and with their partners. And then ultimately, yeah, that layer above that for the alignment and courage to take action on insights. You and I were chatting about this, you know, before we jumped on this. And I said to you, you know, like when we started this project, I thought I was signing up for a statistics course. I'm like, oh, okay, like let's understand the statistics and, you know, where is this going and what's the model on that, you know, and about, you know, like 2 or 3 interviews into this, it's like, no. Actually, I didn't walk into a statistics class. I walked into like a psychology and organizational design and like a communications class. And I'll be honest, these are much more interesting classes than just the statistics class.
And it comes to life when you have the story behind it, and that's beautiful. So I think what you will see as a marketer in real life is that in Attribution 1.0, or in general with dashboarding, we were stuck in level 1 and 2. So we had the data, we started integrating. I heard a lot of companies that told me it took us 1.5 years, Frans, to do all the plumbing, all the data integration different. We have now a 360 view and a dashboard, and you looked at information and you were like, I don't know what it says. Where's the customer? What should we do now? Whereas what I've seen with all the projects we have done with value engineering and also with the interviewees for this project is that the dashboard suddenly becomes, you know, a third of what you've seen before in terms of KPIs and data points. But there it goes like, oh, wait a minute. People that read the newsletter also buy more often XYZ. We have to send out the newsletter and the deliverability has to go up. Now suddenly everybody's talking about the same thing. It matters. And before it was just a newsletter. And now it really matters because it drives, you know, conversion and it drives ultimately revenue. And that's the game changer. You understand everything around the KPI that you're looking at across the teams. That's the new operating model, more value engineering, I would say. So yeah, it's about clarity, what attribution is used for. And that is not just to align and integrate data and data points. It's really to align teams around the customer. You avoid your pitfalls, attribution pitfalls like crediting and this is the best model and no, you should have last touch. I mean, if you don't organize this, you spoke about Hunger Games earlier, Scott, then sales, we can tell you beforehand, will, you know, favor last touch and marketing first touch, but that is not the real alignment. That's a pitfall. So yeah, focus on the journeys that grow the pie, the few runways that you really, really need. And you don't need all the journeys and all possible touch points. Then from there, you start tweaking and you go improving bit by bit. And then you change those variables and you go like, hey, this is interesting. Maybe if we try this in that order or in a different way, or twice as fast. Let's see what happens. And this fuels your experimentation. By the way, this is what outperformers do naturally. They can't help themselves. And now we can do all of this at scale. And that's how we can, support decisions with the right direction. So yeah, Scott, we tried to summarize it in the before and after, a kind of an extreme makeover type of table here. What was it before? What was it now? Which one is your favorite, if I may ask?
Yeah, I really did like the framing. We have a few of these different tables to just help crystallize, what is this distinction between 1.0 and 2.0. I would say probably my favorite one here is the purpose. Because to me, this is like the underlying this is the through line of this is, we're shifting from a world where we treated attribution as primarily a scorekeeping mechanism, whether it's a scorekeeping of, a channel or a tactic or, a team or an individual, to really looking at attribution 2.0 as a decision support mechanism. How do we do more decisions, better decisions at scale and speed, which is kind of what this AI era is all about. What's your favorite?
My favorite is focus. I've always wondered, people, the action motion thing with a lot of activity, not a lot of progress, and a lot of conversations, meetings, more tools, more data that still don't give the answer. And the answer sits with revenue. And this revenue is really a great tool to prioritize your activities. And I've always wondered, why don't we do this more often, even on a simple level? And then you suddenly know, okay, this is truly important for the company, for the customer. So we should, double down on that instead of, oh, but this is important. And I've done it because, I took over the job of my predecessor and that's why I'm doing it. Yeah.
Can I pick a second favorite? Is that allowed?
Yes.
Because the other one here, on the data assumptions, and like in attribution 1.0 is like, can we aim for completeness on data? What are we able to observe? And then in attribution 2.0, in some ways, we almost thought of this as like the challenge of like, oh, now with, all this explosion of, touch points and, just the acceleration with AI, things are a little bit more fragmented. They're a little bit more probabilistic. But actually, this to me was the seed of, there's a phrase, we had talked through that the value of modern attribution is not in perfect precision. The value of modern attribution is coordinated action under uncertainty. Because this is, anyone who tells you like, no, we've got this, we've got perfect understanding of like everything that's happening here, and it's just all deterministic machine. Well, whatever they're sipping, send a case to my house. We're living in a world of uncertainty. What now becomes so crucial is, are we still, when we make a decision of which of the opportunities are the greatest opportunity based on the insights we have assembled, how do we then make sure that we're able to execute coordinated action under that uncertainty?
That's brilliant. I love that. And I think this is where AI helps a lot, because it reduces the time we are in this uncertainty phase. You get quicker insights. You still need to decide which one, but before it took a lot more time. So it almost became uncomfortable, I would say. Yeah, and one of the biggest things that we would like to give the audience is, optimize for cache, not coverage. And what we mean by coverage is, we need more tools, because otherwise we don't have all the data and we can't clean it. Reverse engineer, start with the cache. And what we see time and time again in this project and in at the business schools and universities, all those cases of seasoned marketers, that 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the journeys, the data, the tools. We all say less is more. Now we know exactly how that looks like. And that's the only caveat here, you will have to find out which 80% and which 20%. And that has to do with the three questions, who's the biggest customer, biggest product, and the margin. And then you get there. exactly as Brooke was saying, if you have one goal, revenue, then aligning resources around that, makes it so much easier and moves you forward.
I mean, the actionable things that people can do here is, again, designing attribution, not from a dashboard lens, but from a decision lens. What are the decisions that your teams need to make across the organization? And then what sort of attribution mechanisms are going to help us make those decisions in a coordinated fashion better? I think this mechanism of saying like, okay, accept that you are operating in an environment of uncertainty, but that is not an opposite to maintaining rigor, and that sort of pyramid mechanism here where, listen, at this data layer here, the rigor and the analysis there is so important, but it's the beginning, not the end. And then the second round, investing in shared definitions and governance. I mean, we hear this phrase coming up again and again throughout MarTech, not just in attribution, but really across the stack of the value of the semantic layer. Again, we've just got so much data, information, insights. But if what we're trying to do here is make sure we can coordinate across that incredible bounty that we have, it's making sure that we have alignment in the language of, okay, what does it mean for a high value customer? How do we measure, lifetime value? What is, all these things, it just allows us to move faster. It allows us, as we bring more automation and agents into the mix, that they're able to stay aligned with us as well too.
It just occurred to me, there are so many companies I've worked with, and they have descriptions of personas, and they're just, put in a drawer there to die or to be ignored or collecting dust. Whereas if you look at those personas, and we've done this a couple of times, you see that 80% of all those data points are useless, or you can't activate them, you can't put them in a flow or in an engagement. But if you look at those and then in combination with your data, so this is going from data to information, it becomes very interesting. And this is something where you can't help it. You will have shared definitions like, yeah, this is important to a customer and that is not. And again, there from, I don't know, the 20 descriptions of one persona, you will go back to 3 that are highly critical and relate to data points directly, like the newsletter I was talking about. And that's bringing us to this point where, there are not a gazillion ways a customer wants to engage with you. And this is what many brands make this mistake. They think that we as customers want to engage all the time with you. Actually, it's the opposite. Less is more, because then I can spend time with my friends and family. I'm on a holiday. I don't want to book a flight for hours with a help desk and what have you. So what is the best way to help customers? You can plot that in, a type of, these are all the options, but this is what they do 80% of the time. These are the steps they take. They go from search to ads to feature page, etc., etc. But the green ones, that's where we have to excel. That is the moment of truth where the customer goes like, wow, this brand understands me. That was exactly what I needed to know, needed to hear. I can go back to my family, celebrate my holiday or whatever. But that was exactly what I needed. This brand knows me. And you know what? This is where the brand personality becomes almost like a friend, because why do you like your friends? They know you.
Yeah, if like attribution 1.0 like very much was about like, how do you manage this as a funnel? We've got all these things coming in at top and then the next layer down, and what next layer down came from the, attribution 2.0, it's basically reversing, the flow on that. Is the work back of like, where do we actually get business impact, for us and for our customers? And then like, let's go back, work back from there as to what had the greatest impact on making that happen, and then be able to systematically test and improve and iterate on those. I love this.
Yes. And it's not a game of, getting from 67 to 211 touches to 470. That's a lack of focus. Which ones really matter. And if you leave them out, this is, by the way, what I think VCs every now and then do with startups. What if you shut your system down for an hour and see if somebody complains? If they don't, it's probably not sticky, it's not necessary. Why are you doing it? And that type of tests you can run and find out, okay, this is really, really important, and this one is not. It's moving the needle or not. So it's it's a discipline. It's a new discipline of economic prioritization. And yeah, one of the interviewees confessed, yeah, we generated 30% more enterprise opportunities with a lot less cost. The lady, Cassandra, brilliant lady, she didn't disclose this number in dollars, but you can imagine it's a multiple of her salary, of her team budget, maybe even. Imagine that. I mean,
Now that's a story that resonates with the board.
yeah, they will listen to that for sure. Yeah. So that's the cool story.
There are very few things that up to this point I've enjoyed more than going through this project with you guys. And as we were kind of, hitting milestones, and this is, my third or fourth time looking at all of this, I feel like that's one of those movies that you want to come back to and watch it again and again and again. Or favorite song because you like it so much. And it, every time you listen to it, something else comes out. I've read the report, I've collaborated with you on the slides. And the one thing, Frans, as you were talking about, the touch points, that this, multitude of touch points is not really a good thing, regardless of what LinkedIn is telling us. For those of you who was a fan of Joss Stone, she's a singer from the UK. She was very popular in the early 2000s. She had this song. It was called Less is More. And the lyrics in that song went like this: back it out, slow it down, let it breathe, because too much of a good thing could be bad. And I just couldn't help but think about that song. Wow. You guys just summarized all of that.
That's the new theme song.
Yeah.
The new Marketing Ops theme song. I love it. So with all of this, if you don't mind, I would love to share kind of the philosophy of Caliber Mind in all of this. And that's on the next slide, Frans, if you want to advance it.
Yes.
Because as I was reading the draft of the report, I had this very warm and fuzzy and actually an aha moment that what we're talking about really aligns with what you guys have seen out there in the market, where it's the importance of asking the right question that matters more than really picking this or that tool or framework or tactical approach, which is the model, right? Having all of that available to you, but pulling the right tool out of your toolbox, depending on what question it is. That's what ultimately tells that story. And as you were talking about the layers of, data and then information and insights, if you think about the hierarchy within the organization and how people advance in seniority, at the lowest level, you will have people that just deal with the data. But then for you to advance in your role, you have to be able to tell a story about it and understand what matters to others in the conversation. It's that empathy so that they could relate. And ultimately, as you report it out to the board, sometimes you do need courage to decide what is good, what is bad. And sometimes the best decisions are what not to do, not following that journey that leads you to a dead end, even though somebody made it a landing strip, which not really the one that you want anyways. And kind of having that full visibility into the journey so you can make those decisions, right? Like I can see the entire universe and I can pick what I don't like. And sometimes making that decision is very, very hard because the more things are available to you, the more you're distracted. I feel like AI is one of those distractions because it makes things even more available to you, right? But also not to focus on what you don't have, because I think that's the biggest thing that people in a lot of cases cite as the reason why attribution doesn't work. Well, we don't have 20% or 30%, or you name the number of the data. Well, what do you do with the other 60 or 70? How are you helping with the decision support, which I also loved, right? We're very much aligned in helping people with making those decisions, even though we understand that the data is fragmented and limited. But as long as you can double click into that, as long as if somebody, there's always that person, the smartest one in the room who wants to ask you the question, well, how did you get that number? Or where did that come from, right? As long as that person can double click into something and see the logic behind it, it's that, deterministic kind of approach to how did this thing get generated, you put that person at bay, you drive trust in data, and you kind of get ahead of those, QBR spotlight moments where you share your output and somebody says, well, I don't think it's accurate because I'm seeing a different thing. You get ahead of it and you get that person on board, which ultimately is kind of the ultimate alignment nirvana, if we want to call it that way.
Well said.
Yeah, fully agree.
On the next slide, this is something that we rolled out last year, the revenue table or the periodic table of marketing revenue, right? Like the approach that we chose in putting all of this together, if you go from left to right, it's all of those layers. It's your data, it's your information, and your insights, starting with, architecture and maybe sometimes tactical and operational things, data warehouse, workflows, integrations. Then you go into the alignment moments, like what are we calling a campaign and definitions? What are we using for attribution for this question or that question? And as you progress and you address all of these levels of, call it the Maslow's pyramid of marketing decision making. I mean, if we're like all about names and definitions, might as well call that. As you travel from left to right? A lot of people resonated with this thing. We've been giving out T-shirts over the past 12 months since the first report came out. We've been, sharing tote bags at events. People see that and they're just excited. This is this toddler level excitement. I can relate to this. This is amazing, because I think a lot of people live this life, right? They want to see a unified journey, even if it's fractional, if it's not, not 100% of the data, but they want to show their teams what a marketer is doing behind the screen when nobody's looking, right? They want to ask the right questions and kind of train others to ask the right questions, because business is a team sport. That's how I think about it. And unless you have the whole village participating and pulling in the same direction, back to the vector analogy, like, you're not going to go very far. But what's worse, somebody will, and they will beat you to take the bigger piece of the pie.
Indeed.
100%. Yeah.
So I guess our key takeaways from this, LinkedIn naysayers, attribution is not dead, but it is evolving, and actually in the right hands, it is this connective tissue that you need to deal with the acceleration of the AI-powered go-to-market. We talked about these two forces that are converging. We go into more detail in this report, of context engineering is very much the infrastructure of how we're aligning the future of marketing operations. But then that all has to be in the service of value engineering and how we raise human judgment up the stack. You're wondering about how AI is going to impact your job, the opportunity, move to the value engineering layer.
Yeah, and then there's value over credit and cash over coverage. Keep that in mind. Again, we can make it like a song or a tattoo, but yeah, tattoo.
Cash over coverage.
So important, yes. You have to understand that for a long, long time, we thought more tools, more data would solve the trick. Like you just said, Nadia, and it resonates so much with what you said earlier, our conversations. The reason for this project that we said, yeah, but there's so much more. So many great people have so much talent. They work so hard. And why do we move the needle? Not much or not enough. And there's so much more we can do. And this is more rewarding. This comes back to Scott's favorite, the purpose. We're doing it for the customer. We want to improve stuff, get better decisions for the company and for the customer. And what's interesting, what I've seen a lot, the interest of the customer and the companies are not so opposing, much less than you think. They're more aligned than you think, especially if you talk to founders of companies. They want to solve something, right? And if it's getting too political, too big, the message gets lost and the purpose gets lost. And this really gives a feeling of, yes, we're aligned. This is why we're doing. Great, let's do this. And cash over coverage. Cash also follows the customer and the company purpose. So I really like that one. Yeah, maybe it's worth it too. Let's see.
And then if you're thinking like, wow, this sounds amazing, where do I buy Attribution 2.0? Again, caliber mine, fantastic product. But Attribution 2.0 is a discipline, not just a tool. It really requires developing this shared language, getting the alignment across teams, and ultimately, as leaders, having the courage to decide as this incredible flow of insights comes to your desk. It's an exciting time.
Right. I am super grateful for all of your time participating in this project, for the findings and for this presentation. Again, we will send the report to everyone who is on this webinar. You can also download it right now. There's a form there, so if you want it, without filling out the form, we will email that to you. If you don't mind sharing the information, there's a form behind the QR code. You will get the report.
Nadia, thank you so much for inviting us to do this project with you. Thank you to everyone who attended this webinar. Really hope you enjoyed the report. Reach out with any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.